Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me.
The sky above Firestar burned a constant red-orange, never allowing for shadows to stretch or fade. Everything was bathed in heat and light, a place where flame was not only a force of nature but also a part of the people. The Flame Clan had ruled this planet for eons, their mastery of fire magic unparalleled, their devotion to duty absolute. At the heart of the Flame Castle, Princess Lena stood on a balcony, looking out over the fiery landscape that was her home, feeling the heat that no longer gave her comfort. Lena was the crown princess of Firestar, born with an innate ability to manipulate fire in ways that even her ancestors had not mastered. It was said that she could summon flames so hot they could melt metal, yet also control them with such precision that they could dance lightly across her skin without leaving a mark. She was a living embodiment of her people's pride and power, the heir to the Flame Clan's throne. But all the power and magic at her command couldn't fill the hollow ache growing in her chest. For years, Lena had been drawn to something far beyond her people's world. She had heard whispers of Earth, a planet so different from Firestar that it seemed almost like a dream. There, humans expressed their emotions in ways her people could never understand. Their creativity wasn't bound by the raw force of nature but by subtlety, depth, and a desire to express the fleeting beauty of life. That fragility, that impermanence, called to her. As the future queen of Firestar, she was expected to be eternal, unshakable, as her people had been for millennia. But the weight of that expectation pressed down on her, suffocating the fire that burned within her heart. Her father, the Flame King, had never understood her fascination with Earth. He viewed humans as weak, their short lifespans and volatile emotions a reflection of their insignificance in the grand scheme of the universe. The Flame Clan believed in eternity, in fire that would burn forever, untamed and undiminished. But Lena had seen the art humans created, felt the passion in their work, and it stirred something deep inside her. There was an intensity in human creativity that echoed her own fire, but it was different as so much more fragile, yet somehow more powerful for it. The decision to leave Firestar hadn't come easily. For months, Lena had wrestled with the choice, torn between her duty and the pull she felt toward Earth. But the more she thought about it, the clearer it became. If she stayed, she would inherit the throne, and with it the chains of tradition that would bind her for the rest of her life. If she left, she could explore a world of creativity and passion, a world where emotions ran hot and wild, just like fire. And so, one night, Lena packed what little she needed and slipped away from the palace. She used her fire magic to disguise herself, creating a shimmering cloak of heat that made her invisible to the guards. When she reached the ancient gate that connected Firestar to Earth, she hesitated for a moment. Her father's face flashed in her mind, stern and unyielding. He would never forgive her for this. But it didn't matter. Lena knew what she wanted, and she was willing to pay the price. The transition between worlds was jarring. Firestar's heat was a constant companion, but Earth's atmosphere was cooler, the air thick with moisture. Lena felt the change immediately as she emerged from the portal and found herself standing in a quiet alleyway in a city she had only seen in pictures. The city lights flickered like distant stars, and the hum of life buzzed all around her. She took a deep breath, her heart racing with excitement and fear. This was it. Earth. She had chosen to arrive in New York, the city known for its artistic energy. It was here that she would start her new life, away from the responsibilities and expectations of her people. As she walked through the bustling streets, Lena kept her fire magic in check, hiding the flickering flames that danced just beneath her skin. Here, she was just another artist, one among millions. And that was exactly how she wanted it. It didn't take long for her to find him. Ed, the man whose paintings had first caught her attention from across the stars, was working in a small studio in the heart of the city. His art was unlike anything she had seen before, vivid, passionate, full of life. His paintings were of fire, but not the kind that burned endlessly on Firestar. These flames danced with emotion, with joy and sorrow, capturing moments of intensity that blazed bright before fading into darkness. It was as though Ed had painted not just fire, but the very essence of what it meant to be alive. Lena stood outside his studio for what felt like hours, watching him through the window as he worked. She had imagined this moment so many times, but now that it was here, she didn't know what to say. She had come all this way, abandoned her world, her family, her future, for a chance to live among humans and create something beautiful. But as she watched Ed's brush move across the canvas, she realized that the first step was the hardest. Finally, she stepped through the door. The bell above the entrance rang softly, and Ed glanced up from his work. His eyes, a deep shade of green, met hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Lena felt a flicker of uncertainty. What if he didn't see her as she saw him? What if this was all a mistake? "Hi," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous energy bubbling inside her. "I'm Lena. I've seen your work, and a broken bar. I'm fascinated by it." Ed set down his brush and wiped his hands on a cloth, his gaze never leaving her. "Thank you," he said after a moment, his voice quiet but warm. "I appreciate that." "Are you an artist too?" Lena nodded. "Of sorts. I work with fire." At that, Ed's expression shifted, a flicker of interest sparking in his eyes. "Fire? Like a broken bar? Literal fire?" "Something like that," Lena said with a smile. "It's hard to explain, but fire is a part of me. I've always been drawn to it." "Your paintings, a broken bar, they're incredible. They capture something about fire that I've never seen before." Ed's face softened, and he gestured to the empty stool beside him. "Would you like to see more?" And so, Lena found herself sitting next to Ed, watching him work, listening as he explained his process. He spoke with a passion that reminded her of her own people, yet it was different and more personal, more vulnerable. As the days passed, they spent more time together, creating side by side. Lena showed Ed how to harness fire in his art, how to make the flames dance in ways he had never imagined. She used her magic sparingly, not wanting to reveal too much, but enough to ignite his creativity. Their bond grew slowly, like a fire carefully tended. Lena found herself drawn not just to Ed's art, but to the man himself. He was kind, thoughtful, and his passion for his work mirrored her own. He spoke of dreams and desires, of the fire that burned within him, driving him to create. Lena had never met anyone like him. On Firestar, emotions were often hidden, suppressed under the weight of duty. But Ed wore his heart on his sleeve, unafraid to show the world what he felt. For the first time in her life, Lena felt free. She wasn't a princess here. She wasn't bound by tradition or expectations. She was just Lena, an artist, a woman in love with life and with a man who had shown her what it meant to truly feel. But as their relationship deepened, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that her time on Earth was running out. The more time she spent with Ed, the more her magic began to falter. It was subtle at first, a flicker of flame that wouldn't obey her command, a spark that died too soon. But as the days turned into weeks, Lena realized that her connection to fire was weakening. She didn't know if it was because of the distance from Firestar or the fact that she was suppressing her powers to blend in with the humans. Either way, it worried her. One night, as they worked late into the evening, Lena felt a surge of emotion rise within her. She had been thinking about her father, about the life she had left behind, and the weight of it all suddenly crashed down on her. Without warning, her magic flared out of control. Flames erupted from her hands, scorching the canvas in front of her and sending sparks flying across the studio. Ed jumped back, his eyes wide with shock. "Lena, a broken bar? What, a broken bar?" Lena stared at the flames, horrified by what she had done. She had been so careful, so determined to keep her powers hidden, but now there was no hiding. The truth was out. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to, a broken bar." But Ed wasn't looking at the flames anymore. He was looking at her. "What are you?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Lena swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The moment she had been dreading since the day she arrived on Earth. She could lie, try to cover up the truth, but what would be the point? Ed deserved to know. She couldn't hide from him any longer. "I'm not from here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm from a planet called Firestar. My people broken bar we control fire. It's a part of us, just like breathing. I came here to escape my duties, to find something more, something a broken bar real." Ed didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Lena felt her heart sink. This was the end. He would never understand. How could he? But then, slowly, Ed stepped forward. He reached out and gently took her hand in his, the warmth of his skin a comfort she hadn't realized she needed. "Rebroken bar incredible," he said, his voice filled with awe. "I've never met anyone like you." Lena blinked, tears stinging her eyes. "You're not a broken bar afraid?" Ed shook his head. I mean, it's a lot to take in, but a broken bar no, I'm not afraid. I just wish you had told me sooner." "I was afraid," Lena admitted. "Afraid you wouldn't understand, afraid you'd think I was a monster." "You're not a monster," Ed said firmly. "Rebroken bar amazing. I don't care where you're from, Lena. You're still you." Lena felt a surge of relief wash over her, the weight of her secret finally lifted. She had been so afraid of losing Ed, of losing the life she had built here on Earth. But in this moment, she realized that Ed wasn't like the others. He saw her for who she truly was, and he loved her anyway. As they stood there, surrounded by the remnants of the flames, Lena knew that her life had changed forever. She had come to Earth seeking freedom, and in Ed, she had found it. But she also knew that her time was running out. The Flame Clan would come for her eventually, and when they did, she would have to make a choice between the world she was born into and the life she had found here on Earth. And Lena wasn't sure if she was ready to make that choice yet. Lena spent the next few days in a state of nervous anticipation. Ed's acceptance of her true identity had been a relief, but it was only the beginning. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her more heavily with each passing moment. The thought of returning to Firestar, of facing her father's wrath, lingered at the back of her mind. But it wasn't just that. The longer she stayed on Earth, the more her connection to her powers weakened. She had always known it would happen eventually if Firestar's magic was tied to its flames, and being so far away for so long drained her. It was only a matter of time before her people noticed her absence, and when they did, they would come for her. She wasn't ready. She didn't want to leave Ed. Their bond had deepened in ways she couldn't have predicted. The moments they shared together, whether it was painting in the studio or walking through the city streets at night, were filled with a kind of warmth and joy she had never experienced on Firestar. Earth had given her something she hadn't known she was missing, not just freedom, but love. Lena was hesitant to tell Ed the full extent of the danger. She knew how fiercely the Flame Clan guarded their traditions, how her father would see her relationship with the human as a betrayal of everything their people stood for. And though Ed had embraced the truth of her origins, she wasn't sure how he would react to the threat that loomed on the horizon. The idea of exposing him to the wrath of her people terrified her. She wanted to protect him, but she didn't know how. One evening, as they sat together in Ed's studio, the soft glow of candlelight flickering against the walls, Lena knew she had to tell him more. "Ed," she began, her voice soft but serious. "There's something you need to know. My people Broken Bar, they're not going to let me stay here. My father Riser Broken Bar, the king of Firestar, and he will do whatever it takes to bring me back." Ed paused, the paintbrush in his hand hovering just above the canvas. He looked at her, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "What do you mean?" Lena sighed, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I didn't just leave Firestar. I abandoned my role as princess. My father expects me to take the throne one day, to lead our people. And by staying here with you, I am turning my back on everything they believe in. They'll come for me. They'll come to bring me back. Ed set down his brush and turned to face her fully. And what will you do? I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to go back. But I don't know if I can stay. If my father sends others to find me, they won't give me a choice. Ed reached out, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, grounding her in the moment. You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to go, he said gently. I don't care if your father's a king or if your people control fire. You're your own person, Lena. You get to decide your life. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, and she quickly blinked them away. It's not that simple. Firestar's traditions are broken bar strict. My father will see this as a betrayal. And if I don't return willingly a broken bar, he'll see it as war. War? Ed's brow furrowed, his concern deepening. What kind of war? Lena hesitated. A war of fire. They could come here, burn this place to the ground. My father doesn't see humans the way I do. He thinks they're weak, fragile. If he believes I've chosen Earth over Firestar, he won't just be angry, he'll be dangerous. For a long moment, Ed said nothing. He was processing, trying to understand the scope of what Lena was telling him. But when he finally spoke, his voice was calm, resolute. Then we'll have to figure out a way to stop that from happening. You're not alone in this, Lena. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Lena's heart swelled with love for him, but the fear remained. She wanted to believe that they could find a way to stay together, to protect each other, but she knew her father's power. The Flame King had ruled for centuries, his strength unmatched by any other. If he truly wanted to bring her back, there was little that could stop him. The next day, the sky darkened unnaturally over the city. Lena felt it before she saw Ida, the temperature rising, the air growing thick with heat. She stood on the roof of Ed's apartment building, her eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, a shimmering figure approached, wreathed in flame. Her heart sank. It was one of her father's emissaries, sent to retrieve her. Ed appeared beside her, looking out at the approaching figure. Is that them? He asked, his voice tense. Lena nodded. It's a messenger. My father sent them to bring me back. What are we going to do? Ed's voice was tight, but Lena could hear the determination beneath it. I have to talk to them, she said quietly. They'll want an answer. Before Ed could protest, Lena stepped forward, her hands clenching into fists as she prepared herself. The messenger landed on the rooftop with a graceful thud, flames licking at their feet but leaving no scorch marks behind. The figure, cloaked in fire, gazed at Lena with cold, unblinking eyes. Princess, the messenger said, bowing their head slightly in respect. Your father commands your return to Firestar. You have been away long enough. Lena's chest tightened. She had known this moment was coming, but facing it now, with Ed at her side, made it so much harder. I'm not going back, she said firmly, though her voice wavered slightly. Tell my father I've chosen to stay here. The messenger's eyes narrowed. You defy your father, the Flame King? You risk the wrath of the entire Flame clan? I do, Lena said, her voice gaining strength. I've made my choice. The messenger stepped forward, their flames flaring in anger. You would abandon your people, your duty, for a human? Do you understand the consequences of your actions? I understand, Lena replied, though the weight of her words pressed heavily on her. But I won't be forced back. I won't live a life that isn't mine. The messenger's gaze flickered to Ed, standing protectively beside Lena. This human is the reason for your rebellion? You would sacrifice everything for him? Lena's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at Ed, saw the fear and resolve in his eyes, and she knew that she would fight for Thesa, fight for them. It's not just about him, she said, her voice steady. It's about my choice, my life. I choose to stay. The messenger was silent for a long moment, their flames flickering in agitation. Then, with a final glance at Ed, they spoke again. Your father will not accept this. He will come for you himself. And when he does, you will have no choice but to return or face the consequences. With that, The messenger turned and vanished into the sky, leaving behind a trail of heat and smoke. Lena stood frozen, her mind racing. Her father would come, and when he did, it would be the end of everything she had built here. She had hoped that by declaring her choice, she could avoid a confrontation, but now she knew that wasn't possible. The Flame King would not be swayed. He would come to Earth, and he would take her back by force, if necessary. Ed stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "What do we do now?" Lena shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know." Days passed, and the tension between worlds grew. Lena could feel the pull of Firestar becoming stronger, her powers fluctuating more wildly with each passing hour. She spent every moment she could with Ed, cherishing the time they had left, but the impending confrontation loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. One evening, as they sat together on the roof of Ed's apartment, watching the sun set over the city, Lena felt a sudden surge of heat. She gasped, clutching her chest as the flames inside her roared to life, burning hotter and more erratically than ever before. "Lena!" Ed cried, grabbing her hand. "What's happening?" Lena's vision blurred, her body trembling as the fire within her threatened to consume her. "It's my father," she gasped, her voice strained. "He's coming, has a broken bar drawing me back." Ed's grip tightened. "We have to stop him. There has to be a way." But Lena knew there was no stopping the Flame King. He was coming for her, and when he arrived, she would have to make a final, irrevocable choice: return to Firestar and fulfill her duty as princess, or stay on Earth and face the wrath of her people. There would be no middle ground. As the flames inside her raged, Lena realized that the choice she had been avoiding for so long was now inevitable. She had to decide. When the sky darkened again, and the air grew thick with heat, Lena knew that the moment had come.